Hello, I'm Juliet Antonio.
I'm Aaron Isaac.
And welcome to Where's the Director, because we would like to have a word with them. And for our first official full episode, we will be discussing Steven Sondheim's Sweeney Todd. So before we get into the thick of it with Aaron, I just want to give a quick background on this musical and how it came to be. So, without further ado, Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street, is a musical with a book by Hugh Wheeler and music and lyrics by Steven Sondheim. Set in 1849, Sweeney Todd, a barber unjustly convicted and sent to an Australian prison, for all the Star Trek fans, it's Botany Bay. Yes, that one. Escapes and returns to London, determined to avenge himself on Judge Turpin, the man who convicted him. Todd allies himself with his former landlady, Nellie Lovett, but his plans to kill the judge go awry, and in his frustration, he sets out to avenge himself on the world. Now, for those who may not know, the tale of Sweeney Todd is actually an old one, originally published in penny dreadfuls, which is a term for cheap, popular serial literature published in the United Kingdom during the 19th century. Sweeney Todd in particular was published around 1846, 1847, and by the 1870s the character was familiar to most in Victorian England. So a century later, Sondheim attended a performance of Christopher Bond's straight play adapting the story. While Bond's adaptation was written actually as a comedy, Sondheim was struck by the idea that it could be a musical horror story with a ceaseless underscoring that would keep the audience in suspense. Like, think of the background music that you hear in a Hitchcock film that keeps you on the edge of your seat. Now, one way Sondheim does this is he has a Dies Irae run through the score, which is a Latin hymn that is sung for a mass of the dead. Another way he does this.
I didn't even realize that was happening until you just said it.
It's okay, we're discovering new things together. That's what's great about this show. So, another way he does this is by having dissonance that doesn't resolve, lifting the energy and dropping it back down with some crescendos and decrescendos. Now, when Sondheim approached Hal Prince to direct the show, who had won, I should say, rest in peace, over 20 Tony Awards for producing and directing by the end of his career, Prince wasn't interested, because he saw it as just a simple melodrama, but then came the light bulb moment for him. While the penny dreadful version of Sweeney Todd was actually set in the 1780s, their show would be set around the time of the Industrial Evolution, and it would analyze the human condition of the time. So for Prince, Sweeney Todd would be a product of that age as the factories chewed up and spit out workers. So while Sondheim accepted Prince's vision of the show so that they could do it on a large-scale stage, he didn't see that as what Sweeney's story was. In Sondheim's view, the tale of Sweeney Todd is about obsession and a man bent on personal revenge, something we could identify with in any century. Now, it also should be noted, out of respect to our dear Lord and Savior Sondheim, Grandpa Sondheim as some of us call him, is that Sweeney Todd is not an opera or a song cycle. A song cycle is a set of related songs intended to form a single musical identity. It isn't surprising that people view the show in those ways, considering the dialogue only accounts for 20% of the show. So, when pressed about it, Sondheim refers to it as a dark operetta. Operetta meaning a short opera with usually light themes and spoken dialogue. But he says in his book, Finishing the Hat, what it really is a movie for the stage. So the original Broadway production starring Angela Lansbury and Len Cariou opened in 1979, ran a year before closing, and won 9 Tony Awards, including Best Musical. However, the show was a commercial failure on Broadway and in the West End in London, and the critics really didn't hold back with their contemptuous rage even as the show was awarded accolades. This is partly to do with the bizarre subject matter, and in one infamous example, John Lahr of Harper's Magazine used his review to claim that Steven Sondheim represented the death of the American musical, even though, fun fact, Lahr actually hadn't seen the show and only read a rehearsal script. Yeah, critics and Sondheim really didn't mix. They really attacked him because he was like, what? He's bucking musical theater traditions. We can't have that. But since then, there have been numerous revivals of stagings of the show in concert. In 2007, Tim Burton adapted it into a feature film starring Johnny Depp, Helena Bonham Carter, and Alan Rickman. The musical is often regarded as one of Sondheim's best and is certainly one of his most adored. And Sondheim believes, because its popularity proves, that if you give an audience a good, extravagant story, they'll accept it with pleasure, no matter how bizarre or idiosyncratic it may be. So the version that Aaron and I watched was the one that was originally recorded for PBS in the 1980s with Angela Lansbury, the original Mrs. Lovett, and George Hearn as Sweeney Todd. And Aaron surprised me wonderfully by going above and beyond and also watching the 2007 movie.
I did, yeah. First of all, the one that we both watched, at times the volume went in and out. So
Yeah.
when I watched the 2007 adaptation, there would be moments where I was like, I'm watching it, and then everything kind of aligned, and I finally got what everyone was saying.
Yeah, as long as you understand the main point of the show, that's all we really ask for.
Yeah, there were moments where I thought, the 2007 adaptation was fine. It was good. But there were some moments where I was like, maybe this is a stage thing. Maybe.
How do you mean?
So for instance, oh shoot, am I gonna forget right now?
It's okay.
So for instance, there are just some moments in the movie where I thought that it was just done better on the stage.
Yes, a lot of fans feel the same way.
I don't think it took away from the movie at all. I enjoyed the movie. I just thought, well, maybe that's not the shoot you go with in the final production. But
Ooh, okay. Maybe we could talk about some of those specific moments later.
Yeah.
All right. So, Aaron, after watching Sweeney Todd, what were some things that jumped out at you right away that you want to talk about?
Sure. So, first, this is, I think, straightforwardly a story about obsessive revenge. And I'm not aware of many existentialists who focus on revenge per se. There's Nietzsche who says something about the spirit of revenge, but it's not. It would be a stretch to carry it over into this context. But there are a handful of little tidbits that occur in the play that are really interesting. So, Judge Turbin.
Yes.
If you've ever wanted to know what it's like to hold absolute power and absolutely abuse it, the Judge Turbin is your guy.
Yes.
Juliet, do you want to run us through what his big crime is?
Yes. So, in the plot of Sweeney Todd, as we mentioned, Sweeney is arrested and he's sent to a penal colony, Botany Bay. Now, what happens is Judge Turpin has eyes for Sweeney's wife. He invites her to her home under false pretenses. Trigger warning for this particular portion, there's going to be mentions of sexual assault here. Assaults Sweeney's wife, and then takes Sweeney's daughter, Joanna, and makes her his ward. And he plans to marry Joanna, and he keeps her under lock and key because he's one of the most powerful judges in the town. He has the law in his pocket with the assistance of the beadle. And when Joanna starts to fall in love with Anthony, and the judge finds Anthony outside of Joanna's window, he locks Joanna away in an insane asylum. And it's interesting that you brought up the judge because there was a song that Sondheim wrote for the judge that was cut from the production. And it's very creepy. You know how Anthony has Joanna, which is basically a love ballad where he declares his love and how he's going to take her away from all this. Judge Turpin had a darker version of that song where originally he was peering through Joanna's keyhole. He becomes aroused, immediately becomes ashamed, and then starts flagellating himself into a frenzy, begging God to save him.
What? Really?
It was cut, according to Sondheim, because just as the audience was getting involved in Sweeney's story, it switched to the young lovers, to the judge, and then back to the main two protagonists. Now, Sondheim felt that it should have stayed in because it would have given the judge a great musical introduction. And some productions in the future have added it back in. And I think that's because there's less hesitancy towards showing sexually explicit scenes on Broadway than there was when Sweeney originally made its debut, even if there were creative people behind the scenes who were clamoring for them to be put back in. And I will say, I did watch a bit of the London revival where they added it back in. It makes the judge more revolting. And that's saying a lot considering that he's already a lech. And it just highlights the abuses of power that this man carries out.
Yeah, okay. Well, I didn't know that was...
it's a lot. It's a lot.
So, I think there's two main existentialist points of view concerning the judge. The first... I'm actually happy you brought that up, because the first was Sartre's the look, or the glare, as I've heard it said. So, the look the famous example Sartre gives is actually a guy looking through a keyhole.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
This is working too well.
Yeah, no. Now, I'm not aware of any self-flagellation that happens in Sartre's story. But the idea of the look is the person who is peeking through the keyhole knows what they're doing, maybe not consciously, but they know what they're doing is wrong. Mm-hmm. But it isn't revealed to them until they see someone else looking at them.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So when, and this is relates to Sartre's famous phrase in the play No Exit. Hell is other people.
Yes.
So what he meant by that is exactly what's implied in the look. It's not supposed to be taken literally. Mm-hmm. The thing is that when you see yourself reflected by another, it reminds you of you, but not in the way you think of yourself necessarily. Right? So the example of looking through the keyhole, you realize that you yourself are not a good person. And I think maybe, as a bit of a tangent, maybe that feeds into a fear of judgment and things of that nature.
Yeah, and I think that's also one of the reasons why in Sweeney, Judge Turpin reacts so negatively to when Anthony is around. I think some people could argue that, well, it's because he assumes that all men are like him. But I think it's also because he sees the goodness that's in Anthony's soul, and it makes him feel wretchedly inadequate. And he can't live with that kind of discomfort in himself. So the only way he can suppress those feelings more is if he throws Anthony in jail and throws Joanna in the insane asylum so he doesn't have to confront those feelings.
Well, I think that leads into the second point here, which is if Judge Turpin was just Turpin, it was just some dude looking into a keyhole, arguably this whole play never happens. And it, it's a little creepy, but it's, in the grand scheme of things, inconsequential. But what he has is power.
Yes.
And particularly when you talk about existentialists like Simone de Beauvoir, this issue of power becomes oppressive. So, especially for Joanna, she's in a situation where she's unable, in speaking about existentialism, she's unable to define who she is.
Yes.
And these decisions of who she will be are largely made up from the judge. You see in the play, and I thought this was perhaps actually demonstrated better in the movie.
Okay.
Because it's a more, I don't want to say interactive, but it's a bigger medium. So you see like how caged she is.
Yes.
And there's a scene in the movie where there's a bird.
Yep.
And she starts singing, "Oh, how I wish I could be happy in a cage."
Yes.
Right. So that
I'm getting excited because I'm like, yes.
Yeah. So I think in the second sex, Simone de Beauvoir says that one of the things that halts women's liberation, and keep in mind she's writing during the era of women's liberation, and she was an activist on that point.
In France, yes.
Yep. She says that one of the things that keeps women's liberation at bay is trying consciously to be happy in those cages, when the real objective should have been society-wide to break out of those cages.
Yeah, and the song in the stage show that illustrates Joanna's condition, Greenfinch and Linnet Bird, which is her charm song and her I Want song, Sondheim does something very clever here because the song ends with the words, "If I cannot fly," and your brain automatically thinks the word for the rhyme is going to be die. You think that's the word that Sondheim is going to end it on. But instead, Joanna says, "Teach me how to sing." She wants to know how she can still dream in her prison and make the best of what she has. But then afterward, when Anthony goes to buy the bird for her, and he says, "Why are the birds always singing?" The seller says, "It's because they've been blinded, and not knowing night from day, they sing away." So it sounds almost as if the birds are going mad and foreshadowing that Joanna might meet a similar fate to her mother if she stays with the judge.
That's a good analysis there.
Thank you.
There was kind of a women's liberation moment in the play, but not in the movie, where, and I thought this was something that the movie didn't do well. Maybe it didn't understand what was happening there. But in the play, when, and I'm skipping ahead a bit.
No worries.
But, towards the end, Anthony breaks Joanna out of the insane asylum, and in the play, Joanna shoots the whoever the
man who's running it.
Yeah, the warden. And the way I interpreted that was she's in a cage, and now once she shoots him, she's not happy in the cage. She's not singing. She's breaking out. Yeah, and that's, to me, that was the big women's liberation moment. But in the movie, I mean, arguably, there's no... what basically happens is Anthony just points the gun at him, takes Joanna, and the rest of the women pile on to the warden. Which I thought was fine, but it kind of took away from Joanna's character.
It took away her agency. And I find a fascinating thing with this show is, on the surface, if you were to just look at it, Joanna and Anthony is the tenor, Joanna's the soprano, both of them blonde-haired, blue-eyed. You could argue that they are the cookie-cutter love interests, but when you see what they go through in the show, they're very much not, because they have been through things that would break people who aren't made of stronger stuff. But instead, they band together, and granted, Joanna is a little frenzied, but who wouldn't be frenzied under her circumstances of what she's going through? I don't blame her for looking over her shoulder all the time. But yeah, I don't think most musical theater heroines would have the, would be able to, like, point the gun at someone and be able to take their own freedom for themselves. Yeah.
I was going to say, speaking of love interest, do you want to talk about Mrs. Lovitz and...
and Sweeney.
And Sweeney,
Oh, yeah, we kind of have to. But one thing that I want to talk about Sweeney a bit before is what you were saying about the power dynamics of this show. No one is more aware of that than Sweeney. And, you know, as he says during the song, a barber and his wife... He says, and London's morals aren't worth what a pig could spit. So this shows Sweeney's discontent with London, and in particular the hierarchy. He hates the privileged few who make it harder for the average man. But he's only focused on the micro and not the macro. He's only focused on having his revenge with Judge Turpin. And we'll talk about his relationship with Mrs. Lovett in a little bit, because I have some great notes about that. But in terms of Sweeney and the power structure, we have to talk about Epiphany, which is the transition and the realization song. I was hesitant to call it realization because, you know, Sweeney's discontent with London has been kind of percolating throughout the whole play, but this is really when he succumbs to this. So in Epiphany, this song was suggested by book writer Hugh Wheeler that the song should have a religious overtone to intensify Todd's conversion into a mass murderer. What Sondheim decided on was what he called a schizophrenic breakdown because it would give the song more variety and a lot more meat for an actor to chew on. So in this song, we see Sweeney deciding to be a sword of justice. And we also know how broken he is with his grief. But the moment we know he's truly gone mad is when he breaks the fourth wall and talks to the audience. "You, sir, how about a shave?" And as I mentioned, his discontent with London has been percolating for a long time. But now he just boils over. As long as the current hierarchy is in place, he will never see Joanna again, and he will never be able to kill Turpin. And as he says, there are two kinds of men and only two. There's the one staying put in his proper place and the one with his foot in the other one's face, which is my favorite lyric in that. And he knows he can't fix the system completely. That'd be a Herculean effort to do it alone and all at once. So he does what he can by being an executioner for the wicked in his mind and an angel of mercy for the suffering.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I love that song so much.
I think so. Something that I'm trying to do with the book, I try to argue that the existentialists' view of freedom is one of non-domination. Into say in the least academic sense that I can. It's exactly what it sounds like. The difference between non-freedom and freedom is to the extent that you're dominated. Dominated being how much your life is interfered with without your say. Right? So, I mean, that's clearly the case when Sweeney says, there are two kinds of people.
Yes.
And what's interesting in Sweeney is that he doesn't just have a contempt for the powerful, he has a contempt for the powerless for not rising up and taking things. Now, I'm not going to go as far as to say he has some kind of overarching social commentary, although I think...
Hal Prince tried with how he staged the show and set it in the Industrial Revolution.
I think that's right. But I mean, the story essentially focused on Sweeney's personal revenge. So I won't make it's not all about that, but it is there. And I think the second point I actually wanted to make about the revenge point is it's interesting how when Sweeney keeps killing, there is this point, and I think this sets up the ending. There's this point with Mrs. Lovett where, and it's revealed that she's actually in love with Sweeney, and she gives this song about, we could be happy together.
By the sea, her I want song.
Yeah, and haven't you done it? Basically, her point is, you could walk away. We don't have to do this anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't remember about the play, but in the movie, there is a good 5 seconds where it looks like he's really considering it. And then I believe it's Anthony comes in and tells Sweeney that first of all, now his daughter is alive, and the judge has sent her into the insane asylum, and then it's rockets off. He will not stop at that point, and he continues killing.
Yeah, I think one of the other interesting things with Mrs. Lovett, though, is, as we learn later on in the show, she's a horrible person for, spoiler alert, for lying to Sweeney when saying that his wife is dead when she hasn't been this whole time and is in fact the old beggar woman. And so it just shows she's not that innocent at all. But I think also one thing...
Kind of a Lady Macbeth kind of character.
That's interesting, because Lady M eggs Macbeth on and, tells him, screw your courage to the sticking place and will not fail. But in Mrs. Lovett's song, Wait, she says, hush, love, hush, take your time. And most audience members are like, wait a minute, if Sweeney's whole raison d'etre is to kill the judge, why the hell does he wait almost 3 minutes before trying to slit Turpin's throat? What Mrs. Lovett is doing is trying to say to Sweeney, the purpose of Wait is to establish his motive in that revenge is a dish best served cold, more satisfying when enacted, when unexpected, or long feared. And so I think she kind of thinks after that, okay, maybe his hunger will be sated. And, she keeps building the pie shop. She has her song By the Sea, where not only does she say you can walk away from all this, but it also shows how one of her goals is achieving social mobility and slowly climbing the hierarchy. And you get her discontent, but it shouldn't be so surprising, because when Sweeney finds his razors and he sings the song My Friends, according to Sondheim, the razor is Sweeney's true partner not Mrs. Lovett. Because think about how Sweeney sings it. He talks to this object as tenderly as you talk to a lover, as you can hear with the consonants of all the S's. See how they glisten? Like whispering sweet nothings in a person's ear. He caresses the blade as if it's soft skin, and whenever he's with that razor, it's the closest to being at inner peace as he possibly can, like he enters a trance. In fact, part of it is because Sweeney has found the tool he's going to use to carry out his revenge, his murder weapon of choice. But I think also part of it is that now he believes his wife is dead at this point, early in the show, and because his daughter's imprisoned by the enemy, it reminds him of a time when he was happier, and this is the only love of his that he has waiting for when he's come home. And when you watch that scene, how he's totally zoned into it, and Mrs. Lovett's like, I'm your friend too, Mr. Todd, trying to interject. She's just not getting anywhere. He's only focused on the silver, and how they'll drip precious rubies once he starts slitting some throats. And I think, you know, even if Mrs. Lovett hadn't been a horrible person, right? Say that Sweeney had managed to get away from it all at the end, and they moved to a house by the sea as she wished. He wouldn't have been content in that life. Not at all, I don't think. Because part of him would still be yearning for his wife and for his daughter. But you can see that while the two of them may be working together to achieve their own different goals, at the end of the day, both of them really want different things.
It is interesting. So Sartre would say, you know, different things mean different, have different meanings for different people, right? His example was a canceled class means different things depending on your project.
Yes.
Project being your overarching goal. And there is definitely that when he has those razors, I got the sense at least, he found his new meaning in life.
Yes.
Because remember, at the start of the play, his meaning in life was still his family, and he was going to go see them until Lovett tells him that, oh no, lies to him, by the way.
Yes, lies to him, blatantly lies.
That the wife character, whose name was...
keep talking, I'll Google it.
There was a barber and his
wife.
Yeah.
And she was beautiful. Lucy, thank
you.
Yep.
That she implies that she killed herself with poison. And so his whole meaning in that one scene is taken away from him. And arguably, at least I would argue, he kind of is basically nothing. He's a broken man at that point.
Yes.
Until he finds his razors. And he swears his meaning in life to be revenge.
And what does he say at the very end of the song?
Good question. You have to remind me.
At last my arm is complete again.
Ah, yes, that's perfect.
Yep.
I didn't even think of that. So, I think going back to what you were talking about, would he be content? The existentialist would say, look, when you're making your meaning in life, don't put everything in one basket.
Yes.
Because things end.
Yes.
And I think you get this a lot when existentialists talk about love in sex and intimacy. In fact, if I can make a book recommendation.
Yes, please do.
There's this book, Existentialism in Romantic Love by Skye Cleary? And it's a really good book. It basically just gives us the existentialist point of view about love. And one of the topics she goes into is, you know, there are just some things about modern life that are antiquated and don't make sense. So the idea of pledging yourself to one person forever. Well, I mean, when do most people get married? 20s, 30s, 40s?
Yes.
You still have how many years?
Left of your life.
How many years does the other person have? There's no guarantee that either one of you or both of you are not going to change. And what is right for you now
may not be right down the line.
May not be right later. And when you look at things that way, you have to be kind of flexible. And if you build this obsession whether it be another person, another goal. It can be unhealthy because what happens when it's gone?
Yes. I think Sweeney would have kept on killing.
Well, it is interesting. I mean, he moves pretty quick.
Yeah.
I think it's mostly because it's a play. But it works for the narrative. But no, he makes revenge his meaning in life, and he doesn't. He does briefly. That's the way I interpret it. He does briefly consider, I could leave. I could go with Mrs. Lovett, but then he's reminded, nope. You have a job to do.
Yeah.
This is what you're going to do. And when you think of it like that, I think you're right. There really was nothing that could have deterred him until he dies.
No. And, I mean, the one time that he really goes along with Mrs. Lovett and her plans is a little priest. And that's only because he needs a way to get rid of the bodies. And she's like, hey, what if I grind them up into meat pies? And he's like, brilliant. Yeah, so that's the only time he really goes along with her because it serves his purpose. Now, I think we've hit most of what I want to cover. There's a lot of songs in Sweeney Todd that I debated covering, but I kind of want to talk a little bit about the way Sondheim saw the show versus the way Hal Prince saw the show a little bit more, because you see it mostly as a tale of obsession, but I see it in a way as more of what Hal Prince saw, in that this is what happens when the world of the factory chews up and spits individual people out. And in the opening number, the lyric that catches my interest the most is, freely flows the blood of those who moralize, because it takes you aback. The connotation of the word moral is good, ethical, and if you're a moral person, you're an upstanding member of society, allegedly. And yet we hear the word moral almost screamed by sopranos with such haunting lyrics. So when we hear of those who moralize in Sweeney's world, commenting on what's right and what's wrong with a bit of superiority, especially Turpin and the Beadle, we quickly learn that their actions show that they are not moral, even if they believe they are choosing the right path for the right reasons. As Sweeney says, they are the vermin who inhabit the great black pit and are full of shit. And then, at the end, with the finale always leaves me with a feeling of discomfort. And that's the attention, because it's a reprise of the opening number, which conveys the strange world this story is set in. But to me, it's not that strange, and sometimes it reflects the world we live in, where one individual takes up arms against the world around them. Sometimes on the side of the angels, sometimes they believe they're on the side of the angels, but they're not. They're monsters. And as Sondheim says, to him, it's a tale of obsession. I see it as how our surroundings can alter the human condition, the nature versus nurture debate. And it leaves me with the chilling notion that as long as people are exploited by those in power, people like Sweeney will emerge in this world with a bloodbath in their wake.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. I don't even know where to start with that.
It's a lot to unpack.
So, yeah, as far as... Let me work backwards, actually.
Sure.
So, you mentioned nature. Existentialists since Sartre, I think, and Sartre has to take full responsibility for this, have not been understood concerning their position between nature and nurture. The famous line in existentialism is existence precedes essence. The idea being that the person you are is not predetermined, not by a god at least, or some extra living being. He basically says that your actions hitherto define who you are. Now, the thing is Sartre saying that there's no room for nature, there's no room for biology and those kind of determining factors? I don't think he has a good argument in being a nothingness, because he kind of says yes, and he kind of says no, depending on how you read it. But if you take his work in collection, he very much says there is room for nature, but the overarching freedom that he's proposing is you are who you are in the conditions in which you live. Right? So just take an example. You can't be a blacksmith in the year 2 AD. It's impossible. I mean, you can, but the chance that everyone could do it...
Good luck.
Yeah, good luck. There's a high chance that you live in some place where you don't even know what blacksmithing is.
Yes.
I'm making a broader point. I realized there was blacksmithing back then.
Yeah.
But could you be a blacksmith now? It's actually kind of more possible.
Yes.
Realistically. The point being, people like Sartre and de Beauvoir and later existentialists like Frantz Fanon, who's explicitly talking about racial issues, see that, yes, who you are depends on the decisions you make, but you only make decisions in circumstances beyond your control. So it's a bit of a limited kind of inner freedom that we all have. And so when you talk about there will always be a Sweeney in the abstract, you would like to say not, but do the circumstances around you create resentment and these kinds of vengeful people? Yeah. As a matter of fact, we can discuss if it's moral, right? But as a matter of fact, when these things tend to happen, or if you want to put it in today's context, it's a little dicey, but to move on to another point you made, there is this thing in Nietzsche's work about morality and why you believe the things you believe, right? So Judge Turbin takes Joanna, and believes not only that, you know, what's best for him is what's best for her, but also what's best for her is what's best for him.
And he also seems to believe, especially in the cut song that we mentioned earlier, if he marries her, then his desires will be sated and all his inner conflict will magically go away.
Which is no. But it's interesting. Never does Judge Turbin or Sweeney, for this matter, and this is where I think they're both kind of the same.
Oh.
Neither of them ask, why do I believe the things I do? So why does Judge Turbin basically enslave Joanna? Now, he will say that it's, you know...
For her own good.
For her own good. Nietzsche would say that, you know, you say you're all, like, really moral, this upstanding guy, and you're just taking care of people, but what you really are is a hateful person.
Yes.
You hate the fact that she might say no. And you want to control that. You want an absolute guarantee. This is kind of... he launches an attack against Christians. Nietzsche does.
Nietzsche, not Turpin. Turpin would never.
No. His big critique of Christianity, specifically in what's the Twilight of the Idols. His basic argument is the whole shtick about forgiveness, and this is Nietzsche talking.
Yes.
Forgiveness, morality, you know, whether these are good and true things, maybe they are, but the whole reason you believe it is because it puts a veil behind your evil intentions. Which is, so you see this a lot with, this is especially true in the 2000s, when particularly religious folk would say gay people shouldn't be married. Why? Well, we love gay people.
Love the sinner, hate the sin?
Exactly. But the real, according to Nietzsche, the real intention is just to say, it's just to hide the fact that you actually hate them.
Yes.
In your mind, you conceive these wonderful ideas that no, I love you, but my son's gay, I have to kick them out. But I love them.
It's because I love
It's
you that I'm
because I
kicking you
love
out.
It's because I love you that I'm going to have to torture you.
Meanwhile, the God you believe in is probably going, what the hell are you doing?
Well, and it's interesting. Nietzsche he's not sticking to a truth claim. He's not saying that
Yes.
these things are absolutely true.
Mm-hmm.
He's just saying, isn't it interesting how, this could be the case for some people,
Mm-hmm.
And they never question it. Going back to Sweeney,
Mm-hmm.
I think he doesn't question why he wants revenge.
No.
And on the surface, it's pretty obvious an injustice was done to him, ergo, revenge.
Yes.
But there's this point, and this leads to the end,
Mm-hmm.
where it actually just turns into a tragedy.
Yes.
Because he realizes that the beggar woman who's been following Sweeney and Miss Levitz around was actually Lucy.
Yep, and every time she comes up, Mrs. Lovett always says, Toby, throw the old woman out. That way he can never get close to, that she can never get close to Sweeney.
And Sweeney says the line that all people who are out for revenge say eventually.
Mm-hmm.
What have I done?
Yep.
And the reason I say he doesn't question it is because he doesn't ask himself what he really wants moving forward.
Yeah, after he's satisfied his revenge.
Because he kills the judge,
Mm-hmm.
but and he has a scene where he drops the blade,
Mm-hmm.
and he says, "Forever now you rest."
Yes.
And then he picks it back up again.
Yep. Just kidding.
Yeah, just kidding. And it really goes back to that point about Mrs. Levitz, where before he learns that Mrs. Levitz lied to him and everything, he had a chance to move on.
Mm-hmm.
But he never asked himself, well, okay, everyone's gone. What do I do for me and for everyone else?
Mm-hmm.
Mostly, he put his revenge against the judge before even himself.
Mm-hmm.
And when he does that, it kind of causes a problem.
Yes, a big problem.
Because he loses everything.
Yep.
Until the little ward boy that they've been taking care of.
Toby.
Of course it was Toby. It's always Toby. Comes up behind Sweeney and just kills him.
Yep.
And the last scene is
Mm-hmm.
Sweeney holding Lucy in his arms. Yeah, no,
Mm-hmm.
it's a great play.
And then also, yeah, but one last point before we wrap up about Sweeney and his
Yeah.
madness, it's that towards the end of the play, he forgets that Joanna's supposed to hide at his house in disguise, and so Joanna comes out and he almost kills her.
Yes.
So it just shows how far he's gone.
Yeah.
Yep. And then, it ends with a bloodbath, as you said. Sweeney lies dead in his wife's arms, and then they sing the finale one more time, and that's the end of the play.
That's the end of the play. I want to say one thing before we sign off.
Sure.
How wonderful is that last song?
Oh,
the reprisal.
God, it's so great when Sweeney himself comes out and sings the last lyrics of Mrs. Lovett. Oh my God.
My favorite line in that was it went something to the effect of, the path of revenge leads straight to hell.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the chorus they say, but we have to admit everyone does it.
Mm-hmm.
It was so good.
Everyone does it well, and then
No one does it as well
no one
as
does
Mr.
it as
Sweeney.
well as Sweeney.
Yeah.
And then it ends with Sweeney leaving the stage. The stage is empty. He leaves, looks, and boom, shuts the door behind him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Perfect ending.
Yeah, that's good.
Thank you, Sondheim. All right, so thank you so much for listening to this first full episode of Where's the Director? Aaron, I don't know about you, but I had a lot of fun.
No, it was great. We need to do it again.
Yes, we will do it again at some point. All right, thank you for listening to this episode. Like, comment, and subscribe and all that jazz. If you follow me on social media, I will post the episodes there. We will be back next time with another musical to dissect. We will also be doing more Steven Sondheim in the future. But until then, thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the show.
Bye.
Bye.